This film is for informational and educational purposes only. It does not aim to advertise, promote, or suggest any specific conduct. Case number 16, The Lord Who Never Was. Start with what we do not know. We do not know where he was born or when or to whom. We do not know his real name. Over a few astonishing years, he answered to Lord Glencairn, to the Honourable Herbert Hamilton, and finally to the name history remembers, Lord Gordon. Every one of them was a costume. The man inside was a blank, and he made that blank the most valuable thing he owned. He surfaced in Britain around 1868, a soft-spoken gentleman of perhaps 30, with money to spend and a title to match. He let it be known quietly that he was the heir to a great Scottish name, the Earldom of Glencairn, a title that had in fact lain dormant since the previous century. There was, he hinted, a fortune of £100,000 waiting to come to him and an income of £40,000 a year. People believed him because he looked exactly like a man who would never need to lie. As Lord Glencairn, he leased a Highland shooting estate and moved through the world of credit that the Victorian gentry ran on, where a good name was as good as cash. He ordered jewels from the finest goldsmiths, including the House of Marshall and Sons in Edinburgh, and dealt with respectable London solicitors, always promising to settle once his inheritance came through on the 25th of March, 1870. The accounts of how much he took vary, but he took it in gems and credit, and he took it from people who prided themselves on never being fooled. The 25th of March came. The inheritance did not, and neither by then did Lord Glencairn. He had already slipped out of Britain, leaving a trail of unpaid jewelers and bewildered lawyers who slowly realized the heir to Glencairn had never existed at all. The title was real and empty. The man was a ghost wearing it. He sailed for America, where the soil was richer and the questions were fewer. In the summer of 1871, a new gentleman appeared in Minneapolis, Minnesota, on the rough edge of the American frontier. He now went by a simpler, sturdier name, Mr. Gordon, though he let people understand he was a Scottish nobleman of vast means. He had come, he said, on an errand of charity and profit at once. He wished to buy enormous tracts of western land and settle 100 Scottish families upon them, hard-working tenants who would tame the prairie. To a young railroad hungry for settlers, this was a dream investor. The Northern Pacific Railway needed bodies along its tracks, farms that would generate freight and ticket sales for decades. Its land commissioner, Colonel Loomis, embraced the Scottish lord and threw the company's resources behind him. If Gordon wanted to survey the land, the railroad would make it a spectacle worthy of his rank. What followed was less an expedition than a royal procession. Through the autumn of 1871, the Northern Pacific outfitted Gordon with dozens of horses, a small army of men, wall tents, a French cook, fine china, and a silver service carried across the open plains. He rode the prairie like visiting nobility, sampling tropical fruit at the edge of the wilderness, and gravely marked some 50,000 acres as sold, choosing the land his imaginary tenants would one day work. It cost the railroad tens of thousands of dollars, and it bought Gordon something far more valuable than land. It bought him credibility. A man this railroad would spend so lavishly on must be exactly who he claimed. And it bought him introductions. With letters in hand, the prairie lord turned east, toward New York, where the real money lived and the most dangerous game of his life was waiting. One of those letters opened the door of Horace Greeley, the famous editor of the New York Tribune and one of the most influential men in America. Greeley dreamed of settling the empty West with industrious families, and here was a Scottish lord who wished to do exactly that. Charmed, the editor welcomed Gordon into the highest circles of New York and introduced him onward to financiers and power brokers who could turn a vision into a fortune. By January 1872, Gordon had taken rooms in New York and begun to spread a far bolder story than any he had told before. He let it be known, in careful confidence, that he secretly owned 60,000 shares of the Erie Railway, and that he represented a circle of noble English investors whose combined holdings gave them control of the entire company. It was a rumor designed to travel, and travel it did, straight to the one man it was built to reach. That man was Jay Gould. By 1872, Gould was already one of the most feared financiers in America, a small, quiet, ruthless operator who had clawed his way through the brutal Erie War for control of the Erie Railway. He had been its president and had been forced out, and he wanted it back. To Gould, a foreign nobleman who secretly controlled the votes he needed was not a threat. He was the answer to a prayer. On the 2nd of March, 1872, Gould came calling, the ruthless robber baron paying court to the mysterious lord. Gordon received him with the cool confidence of a man who needed nothing. He hinted at his vast Erie holdings, at the noble friends across the ocean, at the diplomatic missions the Queen herself had entrusted to him. He had been, he said, the youngest member of the House of Lords, sent to outmaneuver Bismarck himself. Every word was invented, and Gould, the master manipulator, drank it in. To seal their alliance and pool their interests, Gould did something extraordinary. He handed the stranger a fortune. The exact contents were a basket of paper and money, blocks of Erie stock, shares in other railroads, bonds, and a heavy sum of cash, somewhere around $200,000 of it. Taken together, history has remembered the figure by a single round number. About $1 million placed into the hands of a man whose real name Gould did not know. It was meant as a gesture of trust between partners. Gordon understood it as merchandise. Within days, he had passed the securities to brokers in New York and Philadelphia with instructions to sell, turning Gould's collateral into hard cash that flowed straight to him. The richest robber baron in America had, in effect, paid a ransom for a partnership that existed only in his own desperate imagination. Around the 22nd of March, the trap sprung backward. Gould learned that his securities were being dumped on the market in Philadelphia at cut-rate prices. The partner he had trusted was liquidating him. In a fury, Gould cornered Gordon, recovered what he could, the cash and the unsold paper, but the Erie shares and others were already gone, sold to strangers and impossible to claw back. The great manipulator had been manipulated, and he knew it. Gould did what Gould always did. He went to court. He sued Gordon and had him arrested, demanding the return of everything. But this was a fight between two confidence men, and Gordon was unafraid of a courtroom. He had spent his whole life proving things that were not true. Bail was set at $37,000, and respectable bondsmen, taken in like everyone else, put up the money on the word of a lord. On the witness stand, Gould's lawyer, the formidable David Dudley Field, pressed Gordon for the one thing a real lord could easily give: names. The names and addresses of his noble English relatives, the stepfather, the sister, the uncle who could confirm who he was. Calmly, Gordon supplied them. The court adjourned to verify, and cables raced across the Atlantic to the American consulates in London, Paris, and Bern. The replies came back one by one, and each said the same thing: no such person, no such address. The relatives Gordon had named with such confidence did not exist anywhere on earth. The Lord was a fiction down to the last cousin, but the cables took time, and Gordon did not wait to hear them read aloud in court. Before the trial could finish, he was gone, leaving his bondsmen to lose their $37,000 and the law grasping at empty air. He ran north through Montreal and Toronto, and by October 1872 he had reached the very edge of the settled world. Fort Garry, on the Red River, the rough little community that was becoming the city of Winnipeg in the new Canadian province of Manitoba. Here, 1,000 miles from the men he had ruined, the Lord could begin again. He took rooms, spread his charm, and let the frontier believe a British gentleman had come among them in search of sport. And here, for a while, Lord Gordon was happy. He was generous and cultivated, fluent and well-read, and the settlers of Manitoba took him to their hearts. He hunted, he dined, he gave gifts. He became, in this far corner of the British Empire, a genuinely beloved figure, which is its own kind of strange achievement for a man who was no one at all. He might have lived out his days there in quiet comfort, but Jay Gould did not forgive. Word of the Lord's whereabouts drifted back across the border to Minneapolis. A businessman had seen him strolling the main street of Winnipeg, plain as day. One of the ruined bondsmen heard, and a plan took shape, not in a courtroom, but in a back room. If the law could not reach Gordon in Canada, then a determined group of men would simply go and take him, drag him bodily across the border, and collect the bounty on his head. The party that set out for Manitoba was no gang of common criminals. It included Minneapolis policemen, a prominent Minnesota legislator named Lauren Fletcher, who would later sit in the United States Congress, businessmen, and the energetic backing of the mayor of Minneapolis himself. To them, this was not a kidnapping. It was righteous justice against a thief, carried out by upstanding citizens who simply did not believe a foreign border should shelter a swindler. On the evening of the 2nd of July, 1873, they made their move. They seized Gordon, bound him hand and foot, bundled him into a waiting carriage, and raced south through the night for the United States line. It was a 100-mile dash across open country toward Pembina, the border crossing, where American soil meant they could not be touched. The beloved Lord of Winnipeg was being carried off in the dark like a sack of grain. But the Prairie was watching. Word of the abduction outran the carriage, and Canadian authorities mobilized to stop it. The kidnappers were intercepted near Pembina, by some accounts just 100 yards short of the border line, so close they could almost see the safety they had been racing toward. Gordon was freed, and his abductors, the respectable policemen and the future congressman, were arrested on Canadian soil and thrown into jail. And now the affair stopped being about a con man at all. Prominent American citizens, including an elected official, were sitting in a Canadian jail, denied bail, charged with kidnapping. To the people of Minnesota, this was an outrage, their respectable neighbors imprisoned by a foreign power for the crime of trying to recover stolen money. The fury crossed the state almost overnight, and it pointed straight at the border. The governor of Minnesota, Horace Austin, took up the cause. He denounced the Canadian authorities, demanded the prisoners' release, and pressed the case all the way to Washington and the British ambassador. When that moved too slowly, the talk on the frontier turned to something far darker: militia. Newspapers called for action that would be swift, silent, and terrible. Thousands of Minnesotans reportedly volunteered for an armed march into Canada to free their countrymen by force. In Ottawa, the Canadian Prime Minister, Sir John A. Macdonald, watched the crisis with alarm. A swindler had somehow brought two nations to the edge of a border war. Macdonald refused to simply hand the prisoners over to satisfy an angry mob. The men had committed a crime on Canadian soil, and Canadian law, not American outrage, would decide their fate. Coded telegrams flew between Ottawa and the Prairie as the young Dominion tried to hold its nerve and its sovereignty. Cooler heads in the end prevailed. Quietly, the pressure was released. In September 1873, the kidnappers were brought before a special court, pleaded guilty, and were sentenced to a symbolic 24 hours, a punishment small enough to let everyone step back from the brink. The Minnesota governor himself was present, and the dangerous standoff ended not with gunfire, but with handshakes. The war that a fraud had almost started simply evaporated. Gordon had won. He was free, vindicated in the eyes of his Manitoba neighbors, the wronged lord who had been assaulted by foreign ruffians. He had beaten Jay Gould, beaten the courts of two countries, and survived a kidnapping that nearly triggered an invasion. He should have been untouchable, but his past was not finished with him, and it was coming not from America, but from across the ocean, from the very beginning of the story. The newspapers of the scandal had crossed the Atlantic, and in Edinburgh, a jeweler remembered a debt. The house of Marshall and Sons, robbed years before by a charming Lord Glencairn, sent a man named Thomas Smith all the way to Canada to look at this famous Lord Gordon for himself. Smith took one look and knew. The Scottish nobleman of Manitoba and the jewel thief of Edinburgh were the same man. A warrant was sworn out on the strength of his word. Gordon protested that it was all a smear, a plot cooked up by Gould to do through the British courts what the kidnappers had failed to do by force. But this charge was different. Theft from a jeweler was a crime serious enough to support extradition, and the Canadian authorities prepared to send him to answer for it. The walls he had built out of charm and confidence were, for the first time, closing in faster than he could talk his way out. On the 1st of August, 1874, the police came for him. He was boarding at the house of a Mrs. Abigail Corbett in Headingley, just outside Winnipeg, and when the officers arrived with their warrant, Gordon received them with his usual unruffled grace. He read the document. He understood at last that the performance was over. There would be a trial, an unmasking, and the long, public death of the only thing he truly owned, his disguise. He asked politely to step into his room to fetch a warmer coat for the journey. The officers, disarmed as everyone always was by his manners, let him go. Inside, he picked up a pistol he kept close at hand and shot himself through the head. He died at once. The man who had worn a dozen names chose to end the only life history ever caught sight of rather than reveal the name he was born with. They buried him at the Holy Trinity Cemetery in Headingley, and because he had died by his own hand, local memory holds that he was laid just outside the consecrated ground, an outsider even in death. No headstone could name him truthfully. Investigators had searched his papers and found nothing. He had mailed his records away weeks before, as careful at the end as he had been at the start. The grave held a lord who had never been born. And so the swindle that beggared a railroad king and nearly set two nations at war ended with a question that has never been answered. Who was he? Some said the illegitimate son of a clergyman, some a soldier who had served in India, some a smuggler's son from the Channel Islands. All of it was rumor, none of it proof. His final, perfect con was to take the truth with him. Jay Gould went on to build one of the great fortunes of the age and is remembered as a titan of American finance. But for a few months in 1872, the most cunning manipulator on Wall Street was outplayed completely by a man with no name and no past, who walked away with $1 million and a legend. The lesson of Lord Gordon is a quiet and uncomfortable one. The most dangerous con is not a false fortune. It is a false self, worn so well that even the grave cannot tell you the truth.